Hello and welcome to Clay to Candy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. And welcome to the Halloween 2025 series. One of my very first videos, I used some chicken wire and fabric mache to make a cat lantern. In this video, I'm adapting that process and we're going to be making these pumpkin lanterns in a very similar way but without the chicken wire, which is a little bit easier if you don't want to deal with that kind of understructure. So come on, let's do this. For this project, you're going to need a beach ball, some twine, some burlap, fabric of your choosing, could be totally scraps, and some Elmer's glue. So to get me started, I'm going to go ahead and blow up my beach ball. And I actually have several different sizes going. And you can use any size beach ball you want. I have this quickie little air pump that came with my yoga ball, but I think you can also get these in those little balloon kits. Blow up your own balloon. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way and blow up the beach ball the old-fashioned way. But this is pretty handy, especially since I'm making a bunch. Now you don't want to inflate your ball all the way because we're going to be tying some of this jute around it, this natural garden twine. You want this to be natural. It could be a cotton string, but this is going to become part of the pumpkin. So you want to make sure that it is a natural fiber that can adhere to the glue. I suppose you could also use a yarn. I had some problems with some of the synthetic fabrics and it absorbing the Elmer's glue. For the sake of what I'm doing here, I've avoided it. I'm just using cotton. Since I'm going to be using burlaps, I want something that's going to sort of match the burlap. I'm gonna go ahead and take some of that twine and I'm just looking at my beach ball. They all have sections, so find the two sections that match each other and tie yourself a knot. You want to make sure that your plug is exposed and accessible, but you also want these knots at the top. You want it pretty taut because we're using this twine to make the ridges of the pumpkin. And then I'm going to rotate my knot so I have it up here at the top. To help me out, I'm hanging these over my patio area to dry. I'm going to knot one of these so that way I have something to hang it on. A little hanger. And I'm going to repeat this in the other sections. You want to check your bottom, adjust your string so that you're in equal parts of those wedges. And the tighter you make the string, the more prominent your ridges are going to be. And since this one is not going to do the hanging, I'm going to cut off my extra so it doesn't get in the way. Okay, next step is you're going to inflate as much air as you can into this guy after you make sure your strings are all adjusted properly. Alright, now it is ready to go to have the first layer of burlap attached. So I have another beach ball here, and I have a large soccer ball one, and then I got the small guy prepped so I can have multiple sizes of pumpkins. This is going to be a couple day project because you are going to need to let each of the layers fully dry, and having this hanging is actually allowing for the whole thing to be coated completely all at once, having to do it in sections where you let one side dry, then flip it over the next day and do the other side. But if you have the ability to hang this, then that would be the best way. For the burlap, I'm going to do one of those plain. I do have some colored burlap, but you're just going to cut some strips of this burlap. I like to have different sizes. The strips are going to all be dependent on the size of the beach ball you're using. For this larger one, I can get away with doing some bigger strips, but for something like this smaller one, I want to make sure that I make some smaller strips. If they're too big of strips, when you start coating over, you're going to get a bunch of rippling and it won't be as smooth. This colored burlap I'm going to use for that larger size pumpkin. I'm going to make some medium-sized strips, and this burlap's all jacked up, so we're going to have various sizes here. I think this is a good size to get me going. I'll do some squares. You want to have a selection because once you get going with your hands covered in the Elmer's glue, it goes pretty quickly. So having a selection of different size shapes is really helpful if they're prepped and ready to go, so you don't have to completely stop what you're doing, wash your hands, and then go back to the cutting. I have like a lighter yellow and some of this green burlap for my other two pumpkins, my, I guess, small, medium, large, right? This is just leftover from craft project before, and I might as well use them up, and they feel festive enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and prep up all of my burlap before we get coating away. All right, put down some plastic. My Elmer's glue is watered down 2 to 1, so I have 2 parts Elmer's glue to 1 part water. You want it a little bit on that thicker side for the sake of the burlap. I'm using this burlap because the burlap gives you a really nice strong understructure, and since I don't have any metal or wire underneath this, the strength of the burlap really what you want so that you don't have to keep putting multiple coats of your fabric. So that's why we're using the burlap. Burlap is something that's used often in making scrims for the stage. So my first step is I'm going to be dunking this burlap into my glue here, but I also am making sure I hit this string. I want the burlap to lock into the string and adhere itself to that string so that it keeps this pumpkin form. It will become heavy on one side, and the other thing is you also want to make sure you leave an opening because you're going to be removing this beach ball and you need some place to be able to access that point. If you like the look of the burlap, you certainly could leave it and not go over it with that second layer. The burlap will allow you to project light through, so if you want to turn these into lanterns rather than just pumpkins, you'll get some good light projection coming through. Now, what I don't want to do is just turn this over and plop it down on this plastic because I risk it falling off as I do that. That's why if you don't have a way to rig it up, you want to do one side and sort of just maybe prop it on the bowl so that it can dry like this before you turn it over. I'm really pushing it into those creases so that it will pick up the shape. Great thing about burlap is you can stretch it. You do want to be careful not to keep pulling off extra bits because you'll get those frayaways all over your piece. All right, it is just about time for me to get this hanging up. As it starts to dry, the glue is going to want to drip down and settle, so you may have to come out and readjust your shapes, readjust the pieces. I'm not too concerned about the little flyaway pieces, those I'll cut off later, but any of the glue is going to want to drip to the bottom. That may take the fabric with it. So I have been just taking a towel, a junk towel, and coming out and sort of taking any excess glue off that might cause the pieces to fall off. So just keep an eye on them. All right, we are moved on to day 2. The pumpkins are dry for the burlap layer. So I'm going to be adding the second layer. Hopefully it only needs 2 layers. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to try first with this larger pumpkin. I have some of this candy corn fabric. I actually have a lot of this candy corn fabric. So I'm going to be using this. I want to cut smaller pieces because, ooh, I did get a lot of flyaways, especially on the medium-sized pumpkin. I think this type of burlap was just a little bit stiffer, more open weave than the colored burlap. For these kind of situations, I was just going around trimming some of the extra bits. But that being said, I don't want to have all of this extra flyaways. I'm going to be cutting smaller pieces to apply because the smaller the piece is, the much easier it'll be to flatten and get the contours in. I think I'm going to stick with pieces no bigger than this. I do have muslin. Normally I do this with some muslin instead of the burlap. The burlap should provide a little bit of extra structure. The other thing I have done is I have added some more water to my glue. So yesterday when I was working with the muslin, I was at a 2 to 1 ratio, 2 parts glue to 1 part water. I now have the opposite. I now have 2 parts water to 1 part glue. All right, I'm just gonna try it out with this little bit right here before I cut any more fabric. See where that gets me and how I feel about it. I think that in the future, cutting the burlap to smaller pieces would also be much more helpful, but I'm gonna roll with it. I think this is okay. Any areas that are like a little too much, just give it a little clip. So here it is. You can't be lazy. You can't be lazy in wanting to get the job done quickly by cutting too big of strips, because when you do, you get a lot of bumpiness. But since these are pumpkins, I think it'll be okay. I think this time I might just cover a bit of the top set it aside, go to another one, let it have a little bit of dry time before I attack any more of the other side. Since I'm working 4 of them at once, I have that ability to do only the top and then come back to it. So I'm going to continue to work this pumpkin. Then I will be picking out some fabrics for my other pumpkins. I have tried different textural fabrics, thicker fabrics. They don't really work that well because they don't absorb the glue as well as your natural cottons. A lot of the synthetics, like the polyester, poly blends, it's made out of plastic. Poly is plastic, and for whatever reason, it just does not like to absorb the glue well, and so I would avoid those. The soft cottons are much easier to manipulate. They're thinner, they absorb the glue really well, and so if you're doing a lot of like quilting with the cottons, you'll have a lot of scraps you can use for that. But also, you want to make sure whatever you're using is just a natural material. You can see a little bit of fabric does go a long way. You can cut your pieces in funky shapes. It'll help create patterns if you cut triangles instead of squares, or however you want to go to town. Alright, I spent a decent amount of time clipping away all the extra little bits on this one, and then I have got myself a pile of my black and white fabrics. I'm going to actually start on the bottom on this one since I'm not going to be doing the whole thing. I'm working in batches, so if I start at the bottom, I think I can leave this upright and let it dry. So this plaid is not a cotton, it's definitely a blend of some sort. You can see it's doing something funky, so that is why you don't want to use poly blends. Little scraps snuck in there. I had this Hocus Pocus fabric and some Maleficent fabric that I bought a while back at Joann's, and I had no idea what the heck I was going to do with it because I don't generally make quilted things that have this type of character, but it was too cute to leave behind. So I kind of just bought it and stashed it away. While I was picking the fabric for these 2 pumpkins, I had these fabrics in mind, so I think I'm going to be cutting out some of the Hocus Pocus figures for this pumpkin, and then some of this Maleficent, individually cutting them out and adhering them in different places on these pumpkins. So I'm gonna get to work doing that and still using my glue technique, and then let these dry out in the sun. This is the fun part, right? Gave myself this background, and now I get to go to town getting these characters up and on. Of course, Winnie number 1. Y'all excited for Hocus Pocus 3? I am. I'm excited. Can't wait to see. Okay, so I did decide that this will be the top. So get a Winnie on there. And I think I'm going to just do all my cutting out first because the glue gets messy. So I just got myself a smaller container of glue, and I've watered it down a bit. Probably about 2 parts water to 1 part glue. It is going to dry clear. Now you could go over these and seal them with Mod Podge. I kind of gotten off of Mod Podge because it takes too long for it to dry, in my opinion. I don't really want to wait like weeks for things to dry. I have been using an acrylic gloss what painters use to seal their canvases. I like that a lot. I've been using that quite often. Or acrylic varnish. I was debating maybe going over these with them. Give you a little bit more protection than just the glue. Or you could just leave them with the glue. Alright, I'm going to hang this to dry. I'm going to be working on the stem that's actually also going to serve as the lid so I can drop a candle into the pumpkin. Thought about doing it from the bottom, but if you pick up the pumpkin and move it around, you know, I don't want it to fall out. So I've decided to make it as part of the stem that kind of drops down. This also gives an opportunity that if you didn't want to put a stem on it, you could pop a light into the inside and hang the pumpkin from the ceiling like a pendant light would be. I'm going to be using some burlap. When soaked well in the glue, drapes quite well. You need something to stand your stem on. So I just drove a fettling knife through a piece of foam and I'm balancing it over this. You could take a food container, pop a hole in this, and just balance this within it. Basically what you need is a stick standing out. You could also take some dowels and glue them to some wood if you had them. Anything, doesn't really matter. You just need something that you can balance your fabric on while it dries. And I'm going to be covering this in some plastic wrap just to make sure that my burlap doesn't stick. When you drape the fabric, drape enough to cover over where your hole is going to be. We're going to be trimming this up and making it cleaner. If I drape this around here, I should be able to get two out of what's left. Cut my fabric in half. I'm gonna get my mixture going with my glue and this soaking a bit while I cover this in plastic. Wring this out. And I want to give myself a little bit of draping to play with. So I can cut and trim this into a more natural, and that's basically it. You let this dry and then you'll be able to come in and trim out some pieces. While the stem's dry, I am going to take out the beach balls. Alright, I want to see it with a light in it. Oh, it's a nice little lantern. So I'm going to finish off these pumpkins in 3 different ways. Since these 2 are very small, I'm just going to trim up my burlap here and hot glue them on. I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to just come in and snip away, make it look a little bit more rooty parts. I want to make sure that I leave it in a spot that I'll be able to cover over the hole. And that'll give me a nice landing point. Trusty hot glue. When in doubt, just hot glue everything, right? And that's it. I'm going to do the same for this Maleficent pumpkin. And for this larger pumpkin, I decided to turn this into a treat bowl so I can fill it with candy. And to do that, I'm just taking something round, kind of making sure I got it to where it looks like it sits well. I got a Sharpie. I'm just going to cut it open along that line. Now you could finish it off with something on the inside if you wanted, or add a handle. I'm actually going to add a little bit of trim. You could do this with tacky glue, of course, and put in some clips. And to finish off my end, I gave myself a little extra so I could do a fold over so it looks a little bit cleaner. I got a little bit of this rope left over from basket making, and it's certainly not enough to do anything weaving wise, but it'll be perfect for this, and it has that rustic feel. I am really happy with the way this one turned out. I think it's super cute. You could totally put a handle on this and use it as a carry-along treat bucket, but I think this would look great on a table filled with some treats. Maybe you're having a gathering, party, whatever, and people can come and grab treats out, or you can use it as you pass out your candy. I'm gonna have a little fun with this one. I have some leftover felt with a fabric backing that didn't quite work out. I'm gonna cut a face out of it to make it look like a traditional jack-o'-lantern. And I'm gonna make this top removable with the little inserts so that you could pop a candle in this one. Mama, always right when the camera is on. I got a triangle. I like the look of the Sharpie. I'm going to leave it. And I decided I don't like the look of the Sharpie. Say goodbye. Got adhesive on the back that is heat set adhesive. This is my Clover wand iron. This may not work. Might not be hot enough. And when all else fails, hot glue it. Now for this one, I have an old Jello cup. I'm going to hot glue that onto here. That is going to act as the top to help hold it down, and have a strip of some bare burlap that I'm going to use to just cover that over. It's not actually a Jello cup, it's a pudding cup. I don't eat Jello, so I don't like the gelatin since I don't eat meat, but I do like me some pudding. And my plug is disguised. This way I can get a candle in there. Of course, LED, no real candles here because this is a Fabric Pumpkin. I want a battery operated. I picked these up from the Dollar Tree. Probably won't see it lit on camera, but there it goes in. And there goes that. Yay! Jack-o'-lantern. I hope you enjoyed this Fabric Mache Pumpkin video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already. And stick around for more great makes.